For years, the building stood empty at the edge of the financial district, its glass dark, its lobbies sealed, and its upper floors slowly collecting dust behind locked doors. It had once belonged to a private insurance company that shut down abruptly after a financial investigation forced the firm into collapse. Employees were dismissed, records were seized, and within weeks, the building went silent. Over time, people stopped noticing it. The city moved around it, traffic passed it, and new businesses opened nearby while the structure remained frozen in a state of expensive abandonment. By the time demolition was finally approved, most residents barely remembered what company had operated there. To them, it was just another empty office tower waiting to be erased. But in the final weeks before demolition, security contractors assigned to the site began reporting something strange. Phones inside the disconnected building were still ringing. At first, the reports were dismissed as superstition mixed with old electrical noise. Empty buildings make sounds, power systems fail unevenly, faulty lines can trigger indicator lights long after formal service has ended. That explanation held until the guards submitted audio captured on their own phones. The sound was unmistakable, a landline ringtone, clear and repetitive, echoing somewhere above the abandoned lobby after midnight. When they followed it floor by floor, it always seemed to stop before they reached the source. They searched several times and found nothing active. No open office, no powered desk phone, no illuminated workstation. Yet the noise returned on later nights, always in the same pattern. 3 bursts of ringing, a pause, then silence. What unsettled the guards most was not simply hearing a phone inside a dead building. It was hearing it in a place where the internal phone system had already been officially disconnected months earlier. The building's communication lines had been removed from service during the legal seizure process. That detail was confirmed by municipal paperwork, utility records, and the former contractor who had physically cut network access from the basement panel. The internal office phones, however, had never all been removed. Hundreds of desk sets remained scattered throughout the building, abandoned beside computer monitors, filing cabinets, and half-cleared workstations. Most sat dead in silence under dust, but one guard swore he had seen a red indicator light blinking on a desk phone in a 12th floor office shortly before the ringing stopped. When he entered the room, the light was gone. He unplugged the device completely and even took the handset off the cradle to be certain. The next week, the same phone number appeared in an internal log printout from a backup PBX system the city had not realized was still partially installed in the building. That old phone system became the first real clue. Deep in a locked server closet on the 4th floor, technicians found a legacy switching cabinet still receiving intermittent backup power from an auxiliary line no one had documented in current plans. The system should have been inactive, but parts of it were clearly still functioning in limited form. More strangely, it showed recent internal extension activity, not outgoing calls to the public network, those were impossible, but extension-to-extension attempts within the building itself. On paper, the system looked as though someone had been dialing from one empty office to another after midnight, moving through floors that had not seen legal occupancy in years. The pattern repeated often enough to create a rough sequence. The calls began on lower executive floors, moved upward through accounting and records, then ended consistently at one extension labeled simply B14 Archive. No one on the current city property team knew what B14 Archive meant. The building officially had 12 floors above ground and 2 service levels below, but archived plans were incomplete after the investigation. A former facilities manager was contacted and asked whether the label meant anything to him. He said the company once maintained an internal paper archive and records basement below the main storage level, though few employees were ever granted access. According to him, B14 wasn't a public department name, but an internal shorthand for a sealed records section created during a lawsuit period years before the collapse.
He also added one detail that would later become central to the story. The man who managed those archive rooms had disappeared 6 weeks before the company shut down. Officially, he was said to have resigned. Unofficially, staff claimed he had simply stopped coming upstairs. Demolition went forward anyway. The city had no budget or patience for stories attached to a condemned structure. On the scheduled morning, excavators tore into the outer frame, glass walls collapsed inward, and concrete floors broke under controlled impact. The process lasted most of the day. By sunset, the office tower had been reduced to a fenced field of broken concrete, exposed steel, and dust drifting through the empty lot. Whatever small unease the contractors had carried about the ringing phones was buried under the practical finality of heavy machinery. The building was gone. Its internal wiring was crushed. Its offices no longer existed in any usable physical form. For everyone involved, that should have been the end of the mystery. It was not. 3 nights later, a municipal records office across town received a landline call from extension B14 Archive. The call arrived just after 1 a.m. in a department where no one should have been receiving internal office traffic at that hour. A clerk working late on zoning files heard the ring once, looked at the caller ID, and immediately assumed it was a system error. The display showed an internal extension format used only for decommissioned municipal linked properties. What froze him in place was the label beneath the number. It wasn't random. The PBX still recognized the source name and displayed it in block letters, B14 Archive. The clerk answered partly out of curiosity, expecting static or digital noise. Instead, he heard a low line hiss, followed by the sound of paper shifting, as though someone were moving through files very close to the receiver. Then the line went dead. That should have remained an isolated anomaly, but the same extension called again the following night. This time, 2 employees were present. Both heard the ring, both saw the extension ID, and both later gave matching accounts of what came through the speaker after they answered. For several seconds, there was no voice, only a room tone impossible to place, distant ventilation, paper movement, and something like a drawer opening slowly. Then a man's voice, weak and dry, spoke a sentence neither employee forgot. They kept the files down here. The line remained open long enough for one of them to ask who was speaking. No answer came back. A moment later, the line disconnected on its own. The employees reported the incident immediately, and the case moved from rumor into official attention for the first time. Property records, demolition permits, and archived engineering plans were pulled together in the same office where the calls had been received. Investigators needed to answer a basic question before anything else mattered. How could a destroyed building generate an internal extension call after demolition? Utility providers confirmed the phone trunk had been terminated, demolition photos confirmed the structure no longer stood, yet the old PBX extension continued to appear through a still functioning municipal exchange path nobody had realized remained linked through archived infrastructure. The technicians called it a ghost route in the network, an obsolete pathway that should have failed cleanly but somehow persisted. That explained part of the signal. It did not explain the voice, the timing, and the specific archive label tied to a room that by all available evidence now exists only beneath rubble. The oldest surviving floor plans were then compared against demolition maps. Hidden below the documented lower service level, one rough architectural revision did show a compact archive chamber branching off a maintenance corridor. It had been added late during litigation, likely to isolate sensitive records from routine staff access. The chamber had no direct public elevator route and only one secure stair entry through the basement. More disturbing was the demolition note attached to the plan. The lower chamber had been marked assumed inaccessible after partial structural collapse in the years before the building was abandoned. In other words, there was a chance the room had existed all the way through demolition without ever being fully re-entered, documented, or cleared by the teams who later sealed the site. Attention turned back to the building's final operating years. Former employees described a climate of secrecy, internal audits, late-night document removal, and quiet panic among executives trying to contain financial exposure. Several remembered the archive manager by name. He was methodical, private, and known for refusing unauthorized records access, even to senior staff. Then, one week, he stopped appearing in public areas entirely. Management explained that he had been reassigned to basement file work. After that, no one seemed to see him clearly again. Still, his extension remained active in archived internal memos for weeks afterwards. Some assumed he was still employed in isolation. Others suspected he had already disappeared before anyone admitted it. The company collapsed soon after, leaving too many unanswered questions for any single rumor to stand out at the time. One surviving piece of CCTV from the building's final month gave those rumors new weight. The footage came from a freight elevator camera servicing the base.
It happened in a hotel that had been standing for nearly 80 years. The kind of place where polished marble floors and soft golden lighting were meant to create a sense of calm luxury. Most nights ended quietly after midnight, when the lobby emptied and the staff shifted into routine. On that particular night, only a receptionist, one security guard, and a maintenance worker remained on duty. Nothing unusual had been reported. The weather outside was calm, the guest count was low, and the elevators had been operating without issues all evening. Yet shortly after 1 a.m., one elevator made an unscheduled stop in the lobby, even though no call had been placed from any floor and no one was waiting to enter. At first, no one thought much of it. But within the next hour, that elevator would be linked to one of the most disturbing incidents the hotel had ever quietly buried. The receptionist noticed the elevator first because the bell sounded in an otherwise silent lobby. The doors opened slowly, revealing an empty cabin lit by soft interior lights. No guests stepped out, no luggage wheels crossed the marble floor. The car simply opened, waited, and closed again. It should have been dismissed as a routine glitch. Older buildings had strange habits, and luxury hotels often hid their technical imperfections beneath polished surfaces. But a few minutes later, the same elevator returned to the lobby again, opened, and remained there longer than usual. This time, the receptionist walked over and looked inside. Everything seemed normal until she noticed one thing. The floor indicator above the control panel showed the car had just come from a level that did not exist on the public guest map of the hotel. The elevator itself was elegant in the outdated way many old hotels are. Mirrored walls, brass trim, soft ceiling lights, and a floor panel polished by decades of use. The receptionist stepped inside and looked more carefully at the row of buttons. The numbered floors matched the public layout, but one tiny light above the panel still glowed faintly where no visible button existed. It was not a floor number she could press, only an indicator she could see reflected near the edge of the panel glass. When she called security and asked whether there had ever been another level in the building, the guard laughed at first and told her she was overthinking a faulty light. But when he came to inspect it himself, he stopped joking almost immediately. He saw it too. Something in the elevator system was indicating a stop between the 12th floor and the roof service level. The security guard checked the digital elevator log from the front desk terminal, expecting to find a minor electronic error. But the event record showed an actual stop request had been processed. The elevator had gone to level 14A at 12:58 a.m., remained there for 16 seconds, and then returned to the lobby. The problem was simple.